Well, he spent over 27 years at ESPN. It is Todd Wachtelhausen. He joins me today to talk about his career, talk about what he has done, all of the different sporting events that he has been a part of. And because of that, has a lot of key insights into his mentality, what has made him such a juggernaut in this business and what he's been able to do. Don't be too humble. I know you're being humble right there by that facial reaction, but Todd is with us on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio and a broadcaster for the USDA. So this is an opportunity to talk Todd's career and point out what makes him inspirational. And look, we could pull up a full anthology, Todd, of how many different events that you've been a part of, how many projects across the globe when it relates to sports, all of the different sports. But if you were to file it down to the most elaborate project that you've been a part of while at ESPN, what would that be?
Came in with the fastball here. And before I get to that, I just want to say thank you, Bryan, for having me, and glad we got down to the W's in the alphabet now. So
Yes, stop it.
Yeah, in 27 and a half years, I mean, there are so many projects, big and small, going, from managing voiceovers of, some basketball games to, as I like to say, I've done everything from tiddlywinks to the Olympics. And while the Olympics and Pan American Games are two of the huge ones, I mean, the 2-week event, opening ceremony, closing ceremony, everything else. The one most elaborate, I think, was late in my time there, and there were 5 in a row of studio specials celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, a show called One Nacion. And it was, as I said, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and it was the first of its kind, really, because it combined. It was a show that aired both domestically in English and in Spanish at the same time, and it got progressively more complex. The first year that we did it was out at the Mayan Theater in LA. And it was kind of a countdown of the 10 most influential Latino athletes of all time. The number one being Roberto Clemente, and it was a mix of music and roundtable discussions, and there were so many newsmakers there. And I remember, being tabbed as to be a part of that, which was really an honor, and especially it lasting 5 years and probably even more going on. But for those 5 years, the first year we had, I mean, Nomar Garcia Parra was there, Chichi Rodriguez was there, Nancy Lopez was there, just all these, huge names in the world of sports. And we met with all of them backstage, right before showtime. And, my coordinating producer at the time, gave some words, kind of introed everyone as to here's what we're going to do, here's how it's going to go. And here's our producer, Todd, and kind of just open it up. And I, kind of got the deer in headlights, kind of like, oh my God, I'm going to talk to all these people. And, really just kind of eased into, the process that we've been doing and saying, look, so many people look up to you. And, it's, we're just looking to have some easy conversations. You represent, some of the best in your industry and your sport and everything else. And, everything went really well. And from there it progressed, over those years. And the last year that I was working on, I mean, it was a combination of Disney resources, ABC resources, ESPN resources. I mean, just the whole family got involved, and it was a really great thing. So I think that's definitely one of those most elaborate where you really see everything that's going into an event of that size.
You spoke about a lot of the notable names in sports who you got to work in that specific event. And those are people that everybody looks up to. What about you would give us reason to look up to you and what you've done in your career?
Yeah, and now you come with the curveball.
There's so many. Well, you also are very humble too. So I want people to know that humility is the name of the game for Todd. But this is a
Yeah.
chance for you to point out your best asset, your best attribute in what you do as someone who has worked in sports media for so long, and why people can look to you for inspiration.
Well, I think I like to have everything buttoned up. In the culinary world, I believe Julia Child would have called it mise en place, having everything in its place, in order. And a lot of people who have worked with me, in my career and probably outside of my career, my personal life as well, know that everything is kind of like, it's got to be this way or whatever else. It's not to say that I haven't dealt with, I got to come up with a plan B or a plan C, or you deal with chaos. You try and plan for that. But I think it's, a lot of just looking out to make sure everyone has what they need. That everybody knows that's worked on me, where we have an event that's been catered, that I'm the last one to go up to the table to eat, make sure everyone is fed and everything else. And if I were to go against the airline kind of safety talk that they give, I would probably be giving the air mask to someone else first, even though they tell you to put it on yourself first. I like to make sure that everyone's kind of looked out for, because the team that you're working with really is not going to work. You can't just put yourself first and then make sure everyone else is all right. You have to have a good supporting cast, and that make sure that everyone's kind of producing their position, but able to help out, where needed. So I think just, the one thing would be that knowing that I'm trying to have everything in order so that it makes it easier for everyone that I'm working with, and we make sure that everything, goes smoothly. Not to say, it's gone smoothly for 27 and a half years for sure, but yeah.
Todd Wachtelhausen is with us, acclaimed producer. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. So those selfless tendencies that you have, when I hear how you coordinate things and how you put yourself last for the betterment of your team, where did that come from? What are the roots of that selflessness? When did we first see it from Todd? Maybe this was even before you got into the business working world in sports. When you were younger, maybe when you saw things like this and you saw that, okay, that's where it came from. These are why I'm like how I am today.
I don't think I've ever sought out the spotlight per se. It's I've always, it's interesting how things kind of started in sports in a way. I remember one time during my childhood that, and this was, not award-winning play-by-play by any means. But the one thing we did, I had a tape recorder, and you had your 60 or 90-minute tape, and it was a boxy tape recorder. And two of my friends, we went out to the high school football field, and they were just hitting a golf ball up and down the football field. And I was just commentating, I was just narrating what was going on at the time. And I've also, that kind of didn't inspire me to go into sports, but it was kind of one of those like, oh, maybe sports in the future kind of, crystal ball sort of thing. Due to a wrist injury, I was keeping score during summer camps, during softball games there. So I think I've always been kind of that sideline person, making sure that everything is kind of, going as it is. I was a manager for the junior varsity soccer team in high school. So, it certainly wasn't, I didn't have my mindset as to I'm going to go into sports broadcasting. It, was actually a networking by a family member who, was able to, get me an interview with ESPN, and that's kind of how it started. And I was very fortunate to have just spent all that time there and really see the transformation of the broadcast world, just to where we are now.
What was that interview like with ESPN?
Oh gosh,
what do you remember?
I remember. I remember driving up to a building that no longer is in existence on campus. And it was a small building that I think now it's just a parking lot. And I remember meeting with 2 or 3 people, and I think one of them, she still might be there. And it was really just talking about my Spanish language ability and kind of what makes a good story, or kind of making sure everything was kind of in order. And at that time we were adding Spanish and Portuguese language internationally to live and pre-recorded events and magazine shows and stuff like that. So it was really just making sure that the talent were counted in and out of break, make sure they had the information they need. We made sure we had the tapes that we needed to record onto. Dating myself, obviously, with dealing with tapes. But yeah, that was, I recall that I kind of tried to dress up in my finery as much as I could as a soon-to-be college graduate. And it kind of, I got a call probably 2 or 3 weeks later on a Tuesday night. And I don't think I finished my homework in college that night. I think we went out to celebrate on a Tuesday, knowing that, I knew about ESPN because we watched it. I mean, we were watching sporting events, but I had no idea that there was an international division, and that my language ability, was something that I could do with my degree. And yeah, I mean, it was obviously useful throughout my entire career there.
Yeah, your focus on international took you to sports that are very international, like tennis.
Yes.
And you have been well traveled in the sport of tennis, going to events all over the world. What do you love most about those moments back when you were going through and meeting with these major, tennis folks, whether it was the talent, whether it was the players, and you putting on these productions?
Kind of what are like key moments, or
Yeah,
kind of
key
just
moments.
everything?
Yeah, big highlights.
Yeah, big highlights. I mean, it's one of those individual sports, obviously, where everyone either has a favorite, like with baseball and football, you have a favorite team. You may not have a specific favorite player, but with tennis, it's all individual sport. And I was starting to produce it when we were still in the Sampras Courier, that era. And then here's this guy, Roger Federer, one time he's a 16 seed, and then all of a sudden, is breaking records. Same with seeing Rafa and Novak and all those guys. And now we're seeing, the new generation, and, it's going to be, it's going to be a huge loss to the sport when Roger and Rafa and Novak eventually retire. And, it's just the progression of the sport. But having seen, 3 guys have 20 Grand Slam titles is just, completely incredible. I've been to Germany and Mexico for a couple of tournaments there, being on site for those, and seeing how that all comes together. Have done a few US Opens down in New York, and really working with a lot of broadcast entities, our domestic brethren, and Canada and other broadcasters, who we've worked with to get their interviews that they need and the content that they need as well. But it's just been, so many amazing things, whether being on site or sitting in the chair, behind all the screens of all the courts. I mean, it's everything from, Rafa's first Grand Slam title to 71-69 at Wimbledon with John Isner, to the longest French Open match in history. I even remember one time we were doing the final of the China Open, and of course, time difference being what it was, we were overnight. Michael Chang, I believe, was in the final, and we got up to triple match point. The stadium had no roof, and it started to rain, and they had to postpone it to the next night. So of course, here we are ending at 3-4 in the morning. And okay, everyone go home, we'll come back, so you sleep, try and sleep 24 hours, you come back, they warmed up, one point it was all over and we were done. So I mean, it was just, it would be one thing to like, okay, that happened at 1:00, let's come back tomorrow at 1:00 and do it. It was another thing like, it's 3 a.m. and we're up to triple match point and we got to come back 24 hours later for, the match lasted less time than it took for them to warm up for that. So I mean, it's just been so many different, names that have come through and all the slam titles and everything else. And so it's been, there's a lot of history between me and tennis.
Someone who you cross paths with, and we're with Todd Wachtelhausen, 27 plus years at ESPN, producer. I'm Bryan Fenley, and anchored Fox Sports Radio, is on the tennis side, because you and I share that special bond with tennis, is Sam Gore.
Yes.
How fun has it been to be able to work with him?
Very fun. So much so that after many years of working with someone, you kind of get to know their ins and outs and kind of their quirky parts of their personality, if you will. He joined us. We were doing a lot of our Grand Slam and other coverage in tennis was doing broadcasts in English and Spanish at the same time. Putting both languages on for our clients and our broadcast entities around the world. And it was just, really fun, kind of went into the booth. Hi, Sam, my name's Todd. I'm your producer. We're going to be doing this, and really easy to work with. He partnered up with Jimmy Arias, a former pro himself. And their team was always great. It was great to have them come up all the time. And it was a lot of anticipation. And Sam is just, professional as can be. Eventually he did make his way to, World Feed and working with ESPN domestic and everything else. But he's never forgotten kind of where he started in a way with us in international. And we're in constant contact now. It's really great, him and Jimmy as well, to have that team was really great. And we've had on the Spanish side, the same great hosts and play-by-play guys, and, really easy to work with. And it makes your job easier too, because they know what they're talking about, but you can kind of come in and say, hey, I want to talk about this, or let's angle a story this way. And, and there may be some discussion, how do we run things, or how do we tell the story? And to have everyone kind of be open to that, just because you have 15 years doesn't mean, you can tell people what to do. Obviously it's a back and forth. You kind of have an understanding and a friendship and a professionalism that, really goes a long way.
One of the things that I admire about you is that your versatility has been seen in this business, from the fact that you can produce live, remote, travel, studio, whatever. Todd is right there. So how would you rate all of the different things that you can do? Like when somebody comes to you and says, Todd, what are you best at? And the fact is that you're able to have experiences in so many different avenues of sportscasting. Moving forward with your career, how does having that versatility make you that much more desirable, especially in the ever-changing, evolving world of sports media that we are living in right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think having had the diversified background, is a great asset. Back when I was looking for a job out of college, I was had a newspaper and I was circling classified. So anyone out there who is a contemporary knows what that is. And now it's just all on the internet and job alerts and everything else. The diversification of what I've done, because, during my career, it's also been producing and directing some events, just producing, kind of coordinating things, leading meetings, with various, departments about, events that we're going to do, being involved with budgetary things. I think as a producer, it's one of the most versatile positions out there. I think you and I talked about before, before doing this, I think of producing as kind of, you've got all the paints in front of your easel, a blank easel, you've got different tints, you've got different textures and whatever else, and you kind of bring all those together. I used the culinary example earlier. With me, I look at the recipe. If it's a half teaspoon of salt, I got my half teaspoon of salt. I got my 2 cups of chicken broth, 2 cups of chicken broth to the line in the thing. So I think it's really kind of being that hub, that kind of in the wheel of bringing everything together to make sure we have what we need. With large events, it was, do we have the control room we need? Do we have the time, on either end that we have? Are the talent already set? Do we have the booths? Do we have catering? Do we have, an audio person? We need graphics for how long and whatever else. So I think, with producers, it's really bringing everything together and kind of presenting it, like with those paints up on the easel. So I think, there's a lot of industries that I'm learning about, and a lot of, spoken with a lot of different people, kind of balancing, between still media, but also other industries that might need a producer, whether broadcast or integrated producer, where you're kind of bringing everything together. Are we on time? Are we on budget with this? Where are we with these spots? Because everything you see on streaming, whether commercials or other content that's out there, whether it's short or long form, you kind of need that person who's wrangling cats, if you will, to make sure that everything is coming together. And I think being kind of that low key and calm person who can kind of, like, while everyone else is kind of losing their heads, make sure, okay, do we have this? Okay, well, what are we going to do about it if we come in, late or over budget? How can we, cut the costs or whatever else? So I think it's just making sure that everything is in its place, and making sure that everything's in order. And if things are going to get a little chaotic, just kind of, help smooth that stuff over.
Todd Wachtelhausen is a go-getter. He's a problem solver. And just for all to know, he's been channeling all these experiences into working with every single U.S. sports league, the NCAA. We talked about the tennis, Olympic Games. The list goes on. Big team, small team. Todd has been able to do it. He might be able to wrangle cats. He might be able to paint an easel as to what it's like to be a producer. I think, Todd, as we wrap up here, you probably could write a how-to manual on how to be a producer. And who knows, it could be a New York Times bestseller, just given all of the different experiences on the variety of different levels from an international perspective. I see you as a huge asset, and I'm super excited to see what comes next for you, because I will be cheering you along the way. Todd Wachtelhausen, I'm Bryan Fenley. Todd, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Brian. It was great to be here.